If you have not seen this week's episode of Death Parade, be warned, I'm going to be talking about all of the major spoilers from this week's episodes and talking about the major events which are leading up to the finale of Death Parade. This week's episode blew my freaking mind. It was a roller coaster of mind messery. By the end of this week's episode, I was happy, I was elated, I was pissed off, I was feeling a lot of different emotions. So let's just talk about some of the important details from this week's episode. First, I want to address the elephant in the room, the scenes that were bookending this week's episode. The episode opened up with a scene with Ginty and Mayu hanging out in his bar, and we get to see that he finally summoned the body of Harada, that one idol that she was completely obsessed with. However, they're still waiting for a soul. But here's the thing. Ginty needs to put a soul in the void, and he's gonna let Mayu make this choice. She has to decide between either Harada or someone else. And this someone else is kind of interesting because they never fully reveal the name of who this character is, but it's an obvious reference to Light Yagami from Death Note. It looks just like him. Not only that, but apparently some of the creators of Death Note actually worked on Death Parade, and I thought that was a pretty nice welcome, and probably the only scene this week that made me chuckle a little bit, because the middle part of the episode is when things frankly just get beautiful. There is an amazing ice skating sequence that is done by Chiyuki, which goes with her entire backstory. We go through her whole life, from when she's a child to when she becomes an adult and becomes a professional ice skater, and when she unfortunately has this terrible accident which completely destroys her knee, causing her to not be able to skate anymore. This scene is really intense because there's about 3-4 minutes of just gorgeous, beautiful animation set to music with her skating. All the dummies are watching and clapping along. It's a very heartwarming scene, but the minute you see the scene where her knee gets hurt, you can actually see parts of her body have ripped away from the puppet as she falls down. But it all leads up to her basically having this interesting conversation with Decim, where Decim is completely enamored by her story. He wants to learn more and more about her life, and this is also where we learn that she actually committed suicide, because after her accident, she felt as if she had nothing left to give. Her ice skating is simply what defined her. After that, when it was gone, she felt hollow inside, and there was really nothing else that she could relate to. It's a terribly sad moment, and it's made even more sad by the fact that she didn't even realize any of this until after she died, which of course is the big irony of Death Parade in and of itself. At the very end of the episode, she's hanging out with Decim and decides to have a drink, which actually causes her to pass out. I'm not really sure where this is leading to. I'm sure it has something to do with Noda and her gaining all of her memories back. But let's get back to Ginty, the real star of this week's episode. The episode decides to end with Mayu hanging out with the puppet body of Harada, and they're hanging out in the elevator, which appears that it's going to reincarnation. And Mayu basically says that it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, what she did with her life, how important it was to them. To her, devoting her entire life to Harada was all it really meant, and that was good enough. Ginty, however, did not feel this way. As the door shut, he immediately switched the reincarnation to the void, and both Mayu and Harada are sent to the void in this very disturbing scene, which is actually shown with the elevator actually crashing downwards into this utter blackness where they stop for a second, and then they slowly embrace each other before their souls explode away from the puppet bodies as they are sent into the void together forever. It's absolutely heartbreaking, it's really disturbing, and frankly, it just makes Ginty seem just plain evil. You could tell that something bad was gonna happen. Even the cat freaking ran away at that scene. In that scene, I literally yelled out loud, "Ginty, you bastard!" It really pissed me off, and I really can't wait to see what they're gonna do with him in the final episode of the series. It's just amazing how this episode was able to create and evoke this many emotions. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of Death Parade? We are only one episode out from the finale of this incredibly ridiculous and well-written series. This week's episode was beyond amazing. What I really loved about it is that it took advantage of its anime format. I know that sounds a little ridiculous, but the best thing about anime, obviously, is the visual style. It's seeing, not exactly hearing all the time. The scene in the middle of the episode, when Chiyuki is going through the skating sequence and we're seeing all of her backstory and there's like no dialogue whatsoever, it's an amazing scene because you know exactly what's going on just through the animation and just through the flashbacks, and it's done really well, and it just really makes you feel good. Getting to learn a little bit about how she died is slightly underwhelming, I will admit. I was hoping it'd be something a little more elaborate than just a straight suicide. But this is obviously going to tie a little bit more into the fact that why she couldn't remember why she died too. I think there's going to be a little bit more with that at the very end of the series. But even with all the Chiyuki stuff and the ending scene with Nona and Oculus, where he suddenly just appears out of nowhere and looks really threatening, Ginty really surprised me in this week's episode, and his scenes were very brief, but they left a massive impact, and that's probably because, they were bookending the entire episode, so you definitely are going to remember them. It's just, it opened up so strong with his scene, and of course you're going to remember, are they really going to bring in Light from freaking Death Note? That would be absolutely hilarious, but it never really leads to that at all, and Mayu decides she's going to try and go to reincarnation with Harada, and then Ginty just completely turns that on them, and it's so messed up. I didn't even think that was possible, that they could just switch them on the fly like that, but it's very disturbing, and it really just paints Ginty in a real negative and scary light, and I can't wait to see what he's going to do in the final episode, and, there's still a lot of other characters I wish we would have had a chance to get to know, and I know we're not going to, because the series is about to end. It's one of those situations where I wish, the final episode was, an hour long, just so they could give us a little bit more explanation and maybe a little more characterization, because the fact that we didn't get to know all of the characters really does kind of bug me a little bit, but I have to see how the series is going to end first. I'll hold my final judgment until the very end. What I will say is this week's episode was gorgeous. It was amazing. The animation was great. The music cues were fantastic. And that scene where she was skating was definitely one of the big highlights of this week's episode. That and, of course, the Ginty parts. They were just really, really good. Getting to learn a little bit more about Chiyuki's backstory. Just can't wait to see how this is all going to go down next week. I am going to do a live reaction to the episode, so stay tuned for that. I'm going to do that along with my regular review as well, so hopefully I won't get too crazy, but who knows? I mean, you guys should have seen me reacting this week. I was actually getting a little nutty, especially towards all that Ginty stuff at the end, so I'm really amped for what they're going to do with the finale of the show. So this week's episode was absolutely fantastic. Great production value, just like the rest of Death Parade. So I'm going to give this week's episode a 5 out of 5. You guys know that I loved this episode. It was amazing. And you should definitely check it out. If you haven't watched Death Parade yet, watch it. It's a really well done, amazing, thought-provoking series, which is doing some really interesting things, and it's different, and it's not outstaying its welcome. It's about to end, and it's amazing because it just seemed like it just started. Oh, well, that's just the way it is. Hopefully these guys will work on another project and do something just as interesting, because they have some really talented people working on this anime series. So check it out. Another amazing episode of Death Parade. And before you guys leave, please tell me what you thought about this week's episode of Death Parade. Did you get the feels while watching this one? What the hell is up with Ginty? And what do you think Oculus is going to do? And what do you hope to see from the finale of Death Parade? Thank you guys for watching my review. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe to our channel, and remember you can also follow us on social media. Thank you guys again for watching, and stay dandy, baby.